Now, with that being said, we could now append gmail.com or something like that to InfoSec Institute. The rest is kind of like taking a candy from a baby, and here's why. If we can have a valid certificate for yahoo.com, then all the intermediate search in your browser will trust it because it's coming as a child or leaf of another valid cert, which is our real cert. Visualize it this way. Yahoo.com is valid, but so is yahoo.com.infosecinstitute.com if infosecinstitute.com has a signed and valid cert of its own. Now, therefore, we can present the client with our forward cert. It'll be taken as valid, and the victim won't see this certificate cannot be validated warning or any of those crazy messages that kind of alert them to the fact that something's not quite right. Now, here's the thing. Ironically, most of the world, specifically the average end user, will just click accept on that thing even if it says it's an invalid certificate or it can't be validated. But people that are relatively tech savvy or security savvy, they won't accept that. They'll probably, cancel out. Now what it looks like, basically the connection between SSL strip and the real SSL server that the victim think that they're connecting to will truly be an SSL session. So our SSL strip Linux box here will establish an SSL session with the real web server. At the same time, the session between SSL strip and the victim is plain old HTTP. Now they never notice because they just trust the fact that when they click on that secure login, they're now communicating SSL. So what happens is when they do that, they click that secure sign-in button, and then they enter the credentials and send them. Those credentials are really coming across an unencrypted HTTP session, which is basically clear text. SSL strip rip this off, sends it right over to Ettercap or whatever you happen to have listening. It could be other things actually. Then SSL strip proxies these credentials that the client sends over to the real server that they think they're connecting to and forms a real SSL session on that side. Now, here's basically what it looks like. You can see on the right here the victim establishes or thinks they're establishing an SSL session with the bank server. In actuality, they're establishing an HTTP session with SSL strip. SSL strip now forges a fake certificate based on what it proxied and got from the bank. Alright? After it forges that fake certificate, it now sends that certificate to the victim. The victim knows no better because the certificate looks valid. Proceeds to send credentials. Again, they're coming over SSL over over HTTP over port 80. They're being redirected to port 10,000, and we'll look at that in just a second when we break the commands down. And then SSL strip can rip those credentials right off and send them to whatever else you happen to have listening. Now, the first command we entered in the video, or one of the first commands, was this echo command, and basically I'm just echoing the value of 1 to this config file. This is an IP forward file, and all it does is turn on or enable IP forwarding on your Linux box. In other words, it allows your Linux box to act like a proxy. Now you can do the same thing in Windows. It's a registry edit to do it. Now remember, to do a man in the middle, we have to do this. We have to have our box acting like a router so that it can forward packets. Alright, one of the other things you saw me do was the IP tables command. So we just turn on IP tables, put in a simple rule, -T, which specifies tables. We're saying NAT here, and we're using the -A, which basically tells us to append a rule to an accepted chain. So we're appending the pre-routing rule. We're specifying a protocol of TCP, specifying a destination port of 80, and we're saying now take that and do an action. What action? The -J specifies action. We're saying redirect that traffic to the port of 10,000. And the reason we send it to 10,000 is that's the port SSL strip listens on by default. Now with SSL strip we could specify another port. It's just that when you did the IP tables command, you'd have to specify that same port in your IP table rule here. Alright, continuing on. Next thing we did was ARP spoof. So this is how we ARP spoof 132, which is the victim, and we make the victim think that we're the gateway. Now we're basically sending ARP replies to the target of 132, basically saying 192.168.1.1 is at the MAC address of our Linux machine. And again, if that's confusing to you, go back and look at the first man-in-the-middle video, because we get into that a lot more because we're not really doing SSL, so you know, we depend on ARP a lot more in that case. So essentially we're telling the target that we're the gateway, which is part of the equation here. Alright, then we went on and fired up SSL strip. We passed the -A option. This is a little a. It logs all SSL traffic to and from the server, the built-in server in SSL strip. We passed the -K option, kill all sessions in progress. In other words, you know, if there's already a session, an SSL session established, it's going to kill that one and force a reestablishment, which allows us to do the hijack. And the -F button basically, or the -F option basically allows us to send a lock favicon on our request. In other words, they should still see the little lock that makes them think they're communicating SSL, even though they're not. Now, with all of this, we did have to fire up EtherCap as well. We passed the -T option with it, which simply specifies text-only mode, because we don't want to deal with GUIs and trying to, you know, configure this via GUI. We passed the -Q option, which specifies quiet mode and does not print packet content since we don't need it. We don't need packet content because we're getting everything we need on the other side here. And then we have the -I option, which specifies the interface. If you're using Ethernet 1 on your Linux box, you'd specify ETH1, so forth and so on. In my case, when I did the video, I'm using Ether0 as my network card, so I specified Ether0 as my interface with the -I option. Alright, that's pretty much it. That's what we did. That's how it worked. We just walked you through the commands. What I would recommend now is going back, taking a look at the video once more with the notes that we just gave you in this presentation. And I'm going to do a follow-up with this and dig a little bit deeper. Actually, I'll dig a lot deeper into SSL, and we'll look at some alternative ways to defeat it. Some are not going to be as elegant as this, but you know, sometimes you need speed. You don't need elegance. So we're going to look at some other ways to defeat it, as well as some other things. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. See you next time.